Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph, and I am here today to kick off one of our Riverside Readers events. So this event is going to be our third speaker. I'm sorry, our second speaker, third event. And to kick it off will be Aaron Christmas.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Riverside Reads 2021. I'm your Riverside Public Library Director, Aaron Christmas. Our presentation is made possible by the California Center for the Book, which is a program of the California Library Association, supported in whole or in part by the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act, administered in California by the State Librarian. This year's series is based upon Choosing Civility, a book by P.M. Forney, and the City of Riverside's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Riverside has for years demonstrated that it values inclusivity. The 2020 Municipal Equality Index reflects that. Our city can be proud of its efforts, from the Mayor's Multicultural Forum to the Inclusivity Statement that guides everything we do, to the annual Carlos E. Cortez Award for championing diversity and inclusivity. As defined by P.M. Forney, civility means a great deal more than just being nice to one another. It is complex and encompasses learning how to connect successfully and live well with others, developing thoughtfulness, and fostering effective self-expression and communication. Civility includes courtesy, politeness, mutual respect, fairness, good manners, as well as a matter of good health. Taking an active interest in the well-being of our community and concern for the health of our society is also involved in civility. Tonight's discussion of the Johns Hopkins Civility Project will be led by Daniel L. Buccino, the co-founder and director of the Johns Hopkins Civility Initiative. He is also an assistant professor of psychiatry at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and the clinical manager of the Johns Hopkins Hospital Broadway Center for Addiction. During this past year, which I think we all agree has been a bit difficult, what with living through a global pandemic, rates of stress, anxiety, depression, and substance abuse have skyrocketed. The isolation that many are experiencing due to social distancing, remote work, and quarantine requirements only compound the sense of disconnection. Stress and anonymity are two of the main drivers of incivility, and civility is a simple strategy to rebuild this connection. This lecture will explore the ways in which choosing civility and kindness can enhance relational competence and purposeful poise and improve physical health and mental health. In reviewing the 24-year history of the Johns Hopkins Civility Initiative and of choosing civility, we will consider how civility becomes a way to renew respect for oneself and others with lasting public health implications. It is with great pleasure that I introduce you to our guest speaker, Professor Daniel L. Buccino.
Thank you very much, Aaron. It's great to be here. Let me try to get my slides on here. Wish I could be there in person, but this it's a nice way to get around a little bit more. We've been doing a lot more of these talks, since in some ways it's so much easier to go different places via Zoom. But have a lot of friends in the LA area. One of my daughters is actually living out there for a couple of months. It would have been nice to have an opportunity to be there in person, but maybe next time. But anyway, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about civility. I'm going to talk for 40 minutes or so, and then I'm hoping we can have time for questions and answers and a little bit of discussion. I'd be curious to hear what you all are doing in Riverside and how you're thinking about some of these kinds of kinds of questions. So, you know, the sort of title today is civility, and thinking about how respect and restraint are really sort of at the heart of civility, and that it's all in the service of rebuilding and strengthening community. So as Erin said, I do a lot of things. I guess what's most important to recognize is that nothing that I say today should be taken as an official position of Johns Hopkins University or Johns Hopkins Hospital. These are all just my personal opinions, and I have no conflicts of interest to report, although as a psychotherapist, I have plenty of conflicts, but that's for another time. So, you know, hey, Riverside, it's not Baltimore, but then what is? There's nothing quite like Baltimore. Hopefully I'll have a chance to come out to Riverside before too long. And it's sort of interesting, in fact, that Baltimore in a way has become such a hotbed for civility, given some of its reputation for other things. And a number of years ago, one of our mayors branded our city with the slogan, you know, Baltimore Believe, which quickly gave rise to a bunch of offshoot slogans: Be Love, Be Hive, Be Green. But this one was one of my favorites, Behave. And I think, again, if nothing else, that's one of the messages of civility. We've got to try to behave ourselves a little bit. So, you know, as Erin alluded, it was about 24 years ago that the Civility Initiative was launched at Hopkins. I had, you know, been working a little bit with Pier Massimo Forni. I had done some writing about the role of manners and etiquette in psychotherapy. A friend of mine was teaching Spanish at Hopkins at the time, and she said, hey, there's this guy in the Italian department named Forni who's working on civility. It sounds like some similar interests. You may want to get together. So, you know, of course, two Italians walked into a bar in Baltimore, and the Civility Initiative broke out. But one of the first things that we did was convened an international conference, brought a lot of experts in civility together, including one of my all-time heroines, Judith Martin. Most people know her as Miss Manners. Again, it was actually some of her writing that got me beginning to think about the roles of, again, the role of manners and etiquette in healthcare and mental health care, and by extension, civility. So, you know, one of the things that we're most proud of is that we've been able to sustain the Civility Initiative for almost 25 years now. And although there has been some waxing and waning of interest over that time, I like to think that we've been able to sort of keep it certainly on the regional, if not the national agenda, in a pretty steady way. Also, being part of Hopkins, we wanted to do just more than just assert civility as being some sort of, you know, just moral virtue that people should do because it's good for them, but we wanted to sort of be accountable and scientific about it. So a fair amount of our work has been trying to do research, help institutions measure the impact of pro-civility initiatives in various different kinds of ways. And, you know, although it may seem simple, it's not easy. And our thought is that for 2,000 years, we as humans have been struggling with these ideas about basically how do we get along with each other, that these issues are not trivial, and that some of the eternal truths do bear repeating. And I think one of the things that we quickly discovered is that there really is something in this for everybody, whether it's a very mercurial sort of business profit motive. You know, certainly civility is good for business, but it's also good for you. There are very clear health and mental health implications to being civil and to being able to establish and sustain healthy and effective relationships, both personally and professionally. Now, you know, of course, Pierre Massimo Forni's estate and his wife, Virginia, thank you for another bulk purchase of Choosing Civility. It literally has sold over 1 million copies. It's never been out of print since it first came out. It's still in its first edition. And it's really just an exceptional book. For such a small book, it's very smart and very, very useful. He wrote a couple of other books too. The Civility Solution is a bit of a companion to Choosing Civility. The Civility Solution is a little bit more about dealing with incivility, whereas Choosing Civility is sort of promoting civility. And then his last book, The Thinking Life, is actually very interesting and is sort of prescient, especially as the pace of things have sped up over the last few years with social media and texting and Instagramming and everything like that. And basically it's a call to slow down and to disconnect a little bit. The suggestion that the good life requires some thinking and some time to deliberate and be quiet. Choosing Civility immediately gave rise to a number of Choose Civility campaigns around the state of Maryland and across the country. And of course, with any successful campaign, it also gave rise to some teasing, choose insanity, choose running. But I think it's important to note that the Howard County Library System just outside Baltimore really was one of the first organizations to sort of create a Choose Civility campaign, and the Howard County Library does have some pretty well developed materials about civility. So there's always been a big interest in civility from various library systems around the country. We're in Riverside tonight. We've been, around the country talking about civility, helping various communities implement Choose Civility campaigns. Just about 10 years ago to the day, we were in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where we were welcomed with keys to the city and honorary citizenship to Lake Charles. So past couple of years when they've really been struggling with weather events, I felt an extra pang for my fellow citizens of Lake Charles. And while we were in Lake Charles, we were there for about a week working with various parts of the city government in various businesses and healthcare institutions. And like we had an opportunity to work with Peggy Post, who is sort of the inheritor of the Emily Post etiquette tradition. We've been to the libraries, we've been all over the place. As I've mentioned, there's been a great deal of interest from a wide variety of organizations. Certainly I work in a medical system, so have done a lot of work with healthcare systems, higher education, K through 12 educational systems, religious organizations, talked to some, we've been to a couple of prisons and jails, police organizations. So there has been quite a wide range of interest and people coming at it from lots of different angles. One of the highlights for me as a musician was actually getting to meet Steven Tyler from Aerosmith. His mother-in-law, Dorothea Johnson, who is the grandmother of Liv Tyler. So Dorothea Johnson is B.B. Buell's mother. Turns out we had known Dorothea Johnson for many years because she was the head of the Protocol School of Washington, D.C. But we didn't know about her connection with Liv Tyler until she sent us a copy of that book a couple of years ago, Modern Manners, signed by her and Liv Tyler. So, shamelessly, I called up Dorothea Johnson and said, gee, who knew, about the connection with Liv Tyler? And she spoke a little bit about that. I guess Liv spent a number of years living with her grandmother, and they remained very close. And Dorothea said, "Oh, do you know Stephen?" And I was like, "Who doesn't know Stephen Tyler? I don't know him personally, but I know the music and would like to know him." And so she said, "Well, next time he comes to town, let me know, and we'll see what we can do." And so next time he came to town, I called Dorothea, and she made the arrangements. And I have to say, Stephen Tyler was a very civil and very lovely host. Again, as a musician, I've been around a little bit, and I've been to a lot of events and backstage sorts of gatherings, and certainly his whole team was very civil, was very polite, was very hospitable. So that was a nice little connection. And down there in the bottom, I'm sharing some of our civility tip cards from Hopkins Hospital with him, although they were plenty civil. So, the rock and rollers are interested in civility. Many academic institutions have adopted Choose Civility. Numerous media appearances for Professor Forney and the book and the Civility Initiative. About 10 years ago, or well, more than 12 years ago, Professor Forney was on Oprah. He probably sold half a million of his million copies of Choose Civility after that appearance. That was really a fun time. Now, sadly, as many of you may know, Professor Forney died 3 years ago, and he's missed greatly. He was a great friend. He was a great mentor to me, and in fact, we were friends with the family. That's my daughters with me and Professor Forney and his wife in his hometown in Treviso, Italy. We got to go visit them there about 10 years ago. Treviso is a smaller city outside of Venice. So he was a great friend, and he really doted on my daughters, who he called the Buccino M.A. So he is missed by all of us a great deal, but we try to keep the legacy alive, and we're all, Virginia, his wife, and I, and everyone with the Civility Initiative, are very grateful that you all are still reading the book and remaining interested in the idea. So certainly Pier Massimo himself was a very loving and lovable guy. Ben Franklin sort of said it well. Pier Massimo always said, you want to try to be agreeable. He also used to say that the winning combination in the workplace and with many of his graduate students were people who were both smart and nice. So again, civility is, as Aaron mentioned, a little bit more than just being nice. It's a form of benevolent awareness. It's about respecting oneself and respecting others. It's about restraining ourselves, and it's about being considerate. And insofar as it is about obedience to the unenforceable, it's more of an ethical practice than it is sort of a legal prescription. There are many different synonyms for civility. It has something to do with manners and etiquette. It has something to do with politeness and niceness, but it's a little bit, it goes a little bit beyond that, as I will discuss. And there are very real public health and quality of life implications. And it is something, you know, again, as I mentioned before, it's something that's good for you and good for others. It's good for business and it's good for your health. And it's something that where there are secular goods and there are also spiritual goods that one can find in pursuing civility. Now, certainly at Hopkins Medicine, we have really seen civility to be the foundation of our pyramid. You know, our teaching, research, and clinical missions are built on civility with each other and with our patients. And we've also been able to enhance our safety and quality efforts, our diversity and inclusion efforts, and even our financial performance with a strong commitment to civility. And then just to sort of illustrate another way we've been looking at it at the hospital, but I think this pertains to a lot of different kinds of businesses, you know, essentially a civil, respectful, and collegial work environment will engage employees to perform high-performing teams that provide the safest care and best service that will drive growth, ultimately benefiting everyone. Now, Stephen Carter, Yale professor of law, wrote another very good book about civility, and he talks about civility as being the sum of the many sacrifices that we're called to make for the sake of living with each other. That civility requires restraint, civility requires sacrifice. As Carter said, it does take strength to be civil. Being nasty is easy, but the fact that it's easy doesn't mean that it's right. I've long argued that civility is a sacrifice that we make for the sake of our common life. Civility derives from the Latin word civitas, meaning city, not literally bricks and mortar, but in the larger sense of civic community. So civility is and has always been expressly concerned with city life and society, how we live together in community. And even though during this pandemic, there is some indication that people are sort of leaving the cities to move out to various sort of Zoom towns, as it were, I think the demographics suggest that, you know, by 2050, over 70% of the world's population will be living in cities. Some of these mega cities, megalopolises around the world. So these questions of how we live together in cities is quite literally going to be an increasingly urgent question. Elijah Anderson from Princeton wrote a very interesting book a few years ago called The Cosmopolitan Canopy: Race and Civility in Everyday Life. And his argument is that it is in public spaces like libraries. I mean, I have always been an enormous, you know, I don't know if you can tell, I'm surrounded by books at home. I worked in the library at college. My son's godmother is a librarian in LA. You know, as a mental health care worker, human service worker, there's more and more services that are being provided in libraries. But, you know, libraries are important places where lots of different kinds of people have an opportunity to come together and interact, just like markets and parks and airports and sporting events. I understand Friday night is a big football night in Riverside, as it is in a lot of the country. But those are important opportunities for different people to have a chance to come together. And the simple coming together and the being exposed to different types of people can build tolerance and comity and civility and help reduce racial tensions. Civilitas derives from civitas, and civilitas means the conduct becoming citizens in good standing, willing to give of themselves for the good of the city. So again, civitas and civilitas are very closely related. Interested in the idea of what does it take to be a citizen in the city? Now, you can't read this very well, but this is tax season, even though we've gotten a little bit of an extension. But the IRS building above the doorway there says, taxes are what we pay for a civilized society. I actually gave a talk a couple of months ago to a group of tax and revenue folks from the state of Virginia, and we had very, very interesting conversations about taxes and taxation and civility. But certainly, taxes are maybe one of the sacrifices we make. We pay for a civilized society, although there's always some controversy about taxes in politics, so as well as plenty of controversy about other things in politics. And we have seen a concern about civility and incivility in politics recently, of course, but these concerns are not new. I mean, this slide goes back to I think 1997. Early on in the Civility Initiative, there was a concern even then that civility was dead in Congress, and perhaps things have continued to get worse. Now, I've been thinking that a very important symbol of civility these days are the masks that we are called to wear in the midst of this pandemic. Certainly we can't shake hands with each other anymore, but I think wearing a mask is almost the equivalent as offering your hand to somebody. Handshaking started as a way to show other people that you're basically coming in peace, that you're not carrying a weapon, that you come in peace. Now, again, we can't shake hands, but the mask suggests that we care about others. The masks are not so much to protect ourselves, although there is a little bit of a protective function with the masks, but to protect others from any possible shedding of virus that we may be doing. So I think, insofar as it is inconvenient sometimes to wear a mask, the way it's inconvenient to have to pay taxes, I think it can be seen as a symbol of civility and of comity and of respect for oneself, and most of all, respect for others. Certainly civil society has long been concerned with belief in inquiry and belief in revision, belief in science. Certainly libraries are an important part of that. John Dewey certainly was interested in the idea of civitas and, building a community, or it is within the local community that really democracy must happen. This idea that all politics is local, or most politics is local, or certainly local politics is very important, and that a public is really constituted through discussion and debate, which is managed much better with a modicum of civility. And certainly civil society and civility is a way to help us manage real threats to democracy. There are ways to think about dealing with legal and economic disenfranchisement, racial inequalities, political dysfunction, and economic crisis. And we must be willing to defend our core principles and commitments to humanism and scientific inquiry. So we think about, the United States' motto, out of many one, e pluribus unum. I don't think that means that we all have to forsake our uniqueness and our identities and ethnicities and races and religions and the like. But this idea that we're all part of the same team, even with our differences. And I came across this from Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address, and I found it very moving and powerful, especially as we're still, I think, coming out of that very difficult January 6th episode in Washington, D.C. And we're really, again, I think, really thinking about how we're going to live together as a country. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. So I think, we all need to be sort of hope mongers, and again, trust and hope that the better angels of our nature will prevail, and that we will be able to recohere as one team. Now, certainly we are in perhaps the most polarized period in politics in history. Things are even more polarized now. This goes up to 2016. It's only gotten more polarized. Things are even more polarized now than they were during the Civil War. So I do think that things are more fraught and more frayed than they have been in quite a while. It's worth thinking about how we want to try to rebuild things. And JFK in his inaugural address sort of called us to the work. Let us begin anew, remembering on both sides that civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity is always subject to proof. Civility is a sign of strength. So there have been some interesting studies over the years. U.S. News and World Reports periodically publishes them. And the findings are pretty consistent. Basically, 90% of people interviewed say that incivility is a serious problem. In today's society, 90% of those believe it contributes to increasing violence. Although it's interesting to see that 90% of the same people say that we ourselves are not personally rude. So this is one of the key difficulties with civility. Every time I do a civility talk, someone says, well, the people who really need to hear the talk, they're not here. How do we get those people? How do we get those people from over the hills or wherever, to act right in our community? And again, this has been the dynamic for 2,000 years. How do we get those people from over the hills who are coming to Rome or Athens or London or wherever? How do we incorporate them? How do we get them to act right? And there's this dynamic of finger pointing. Yes, incivility is a problem. It's not my problem though. It's those people's problem. So thinking about how to stay civil when we may think that the problem is somewhere else is an important thing to think about and struggle with. Again, I'll say in a few minutes, but basically we stay civil not because others always are, but because we are. Road rage is a really good example of incivility, in part because it's exacerbated by stress. Everybody's late to work or stuck in traffic, and it's exacerbated by anonymity. We really can't see who the people are in the cars next to us. That's also the reason incivility on the internet is so flagrant. Anonymity allows people to say and do things online that they would never do or be much less likely to do face to face. Some colleagues of mine at Hopkins did a little study a few years ago, which is consistent with other findings that, incivility in the workplace, rudeness, disrespect, microaggressions can sometimes lead to psychological aggression and can sometimes lead to physical violence. So it's important to try to interrupt those patterns. And again, think with Cornell West about focusing our attention on the public square, the common good that undergirds our national and global destinies. The vitality of any public square ultimately depends on how much we care about the quality of our lives together. Again, the quality of our relationships on sort of a personal level is a key indicator of health, and the quality of our relationships at the workplace and in the community is another key indicator of civility and public health. Ironically, from a shrink, I think it's important to note that civility isn't really interested in how you feel. Civility is about how we make others feel. It's about how we act towards other people. We restrain ourselves. I may not like wearing a mask, but I wear a mask out of respect towards other people. I act respectfully towards them. Failing to control one's emotions suggests that one actually has a weak character. Being uncivil and rude and nasty is really nothing to be proud of. Hypersensitivity to slights is in fact a sign of low sense of self-esteem, a low sense of pride and honor and dignity. That thin-skinned self-respect is really no self-respect at all. It's also pretty clear, that people who are civil, who have good characters, who are, good people, are likely to be good employees. Pier Massimo always looked for people who are smart and nice. I have colleagues that look for people who are competent and cheerful, conscientious. Just a reminder that oftentimes nice folks do finish first. I think there's this concern that nice guys and gals finish last, but despite what we may see anecdotally on TV, in reality, nice folks do often finish first. We know that the good life is built on and requires relationships and support. Certainly when you get old and you need people looking after you and helping care for you, that's more likely to happen if you have sustained healthy relationships across your life. It's no secret that humans are social animals, that we emerge out of our relationships, that human capital isn't just about our IQ, but it's about our relational capacity and our emotional intelligence. And certainly there is a science about this, but Franklin Roosevelt sort of touched on this. If civilization is to survive, we must cultivate the science of human relationships, the ability of peoples of all kinds to live together in the world at peace. And again, there is a science to how to help people do relationships better, and there is a science base that suggests that people who can manage to have good, healthy relationships do have better health outcomes. We know that tending and befriending is just as innately human as the fight or flight response, and tending and befriending elicits oxytocin, which is the hormone of bonding and caring. So humans are nurturing and connected creatures, not just selfish and aggressive and self-interested folks. And, of course, I think everybody would like a little bit more of this in their lives, and sort of relational competence and purposeful poise can perhaps allow us to get more of this in our lives, and certainly we want less of this. We want less lawsuits and less litigation and less fighting and hassling in our lives. Mismanners, you know, in sort of talking about where some of this starts, how do we instill this in communities? Miss Manners herself said, look, if you don't like the way things are, and to improve the situation, you have to take the leap and realize that you have to behave yourself with a bit of restraint and require your children to do so. Everyone cherishes the illusion that you can somehow force someone else to do it and not do it yourself, which would be lovely, but you can't. You can't make those people behave unless you yourself are willing to behave yourself and require your children to do so as well. You know, certainly, you know, 5-year-olds begin to get a sense of how to conduct themselves in community and in relationships with other people. You know, we think about civility as an ethical practice. Aristotle had the ethic of right speaking, and I think civility is sort of consistent with that, where we want to try to say the right thing at the right time in the right way to the right person. It's not about blurting out everything all the time. You know, it's not about getting in touch with our feelings, but it's about being able to say the right thing at the right time in the right way to the right person. It's about being tactful, making a point without making an enemy. So civility is really the cornerstone of all ethical systems, which are sort of based on the principle of respect for persons, respect for others, where we treat others as ends in themselves, not as means towards other ends. And I think here we begin to think of the golden rule, and many faith traditions have variations on the golden rule. Christianity and Matthew and everything, do to others as you would have them do to you. That's the law of the prophets. Hinduism, this is the sum of the Dharma. Do not to others which would cause pain if done to you. In Islam, not one of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. Local church's variation, forgive someone for your sake, not his. Going on to Judaism, one of my favorites in the Talmud, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. This is the whole of the Torah. All the rest is commentary. Go and learn it, says Hillel. In Taoism, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. Toyota tried to get in on this a few years ago. Do unto you as you would have others do unto you. Buddhism, treat not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. Now, so the golden rule is pretty good. A lot of people have, you know, taken it up and organized around it. Although the golden rule in some ways is kind of self-referential, right? If it's good for me, it's good for you. If it's not good for me, it's not good for you. It's a little self-referential. Actually, Martin Luther King civil rights movement had their own 10 commandments of nonviolence, which some of which is built on tenets of civility. Observe with both friend and foe the ordinary rules of courtesy. Seek to perform regular service for others and from the world. Refrain from the violence of fist, tongue, or heart. Follow the directions of the movement and of the captain on a demonstration. They're very difficult aspirations to live up to, especially when one is being subjected to to violence oneself, but still aspired to it. Christianity demands that we live for others. So the golden rule is good. It's a little self-referential. One of the ways I like to illustrate the difference between civility and etiquette is this the sort of manners of respect when we go to certain houses of worship. We're meant to cover our heads, and others we uncover our heads. So very different expressions of etiquette, both driven by the same underlying wish to be respectful in whatever setting that we're in. So what we want to do is live one step beyond the golden rule, to move beyond the self-referentiality of the golden rule, and maybe live by some people call it the platinum rule, where we think first of others' comfort and convenience. If it may not be okay for others, maybe we don't want to insist on it right now. We do not do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Their tastes may not be the same. We really want to do unto others as they would have you do unto them. And life's most persistent and urgent question, again, Martin Luther King, is what are you doing for others? What sort of sacrifices are you making for others in the service of the movement, in the service of community, in the service of civility? Are these just guidelines? Are they actual new policies? Well, in many places they are becoming new policies. In part because today's workplace is one of the most diverse in the world. Dealing with labor is our most important, expensive, diverse, and yet perplexing asset. We have 4 to 5 generations in the workplace at once. Many industries and careers are seeing more and more women flock to them, and including in healthcare, which is changing the dynamics of the workplace. When you have 4 to 5 generations in the workplace at once, you have cultures in collision. You have young people checking their screens 500 times a day, and you have boomers who are on their screens much less often. And there's just a conflict about, is this good? Is this bad? Is it good to be more connected? Do we want to be disconnected? Nevertheless, the cost of incivility in the workplace is very expensive. The American Psychological Association estimates it at about $300 billion a year in terms of workplace stress due to absenteeism, loss of productivity due to decreased morale, turnover, and then utilizing of medical and mental health care benefits. Again, it may be simple, but it's not so easy. So what's anyone to do to improve civility? What's a leader to do? What's anyone to do? Well, we want to try to model good behavior. We want to ask for feedback in the workplace about how things are going. We want to hire for civility. We want to do team interviews. You know, when I'm interviewing somebody, people know to be on good behavior with me, but they may be a little bit rude or snippy with the security guard or one of the administrative team. So I want to check in with everybody about their impressions of people. We want to teach civility. We want to create good group norms, reward good behavior, and penalize bad behavior. That's something that comes up a lot. Are issues of accountability, that if we are going to take this seriously, we need to hold people accountable for civility as well as for incivility. One time it meant muscles, but today it means getting along with people. So part of what we've been doing in the Hopkins Health System is sort of rolled out this civility campaign where we took 10 points from choosing civility and sort of rolled it out in various sorts of ways, tip cards and plasma screens, and we changed the employee evaluation system and all different kinds of employee handbook and the way to sort of emphasize these things. So basically, if nothing else, what we want to do is listen and be present. You know, Mary Oliver, the poet, said to pay attention. This is our endless and proper work. We want to first try to understand and then be understood. The power of a smile is immeasurable. Say, I'm sorry. Take responsibility. Don't blame others. And if you say you're going to fix something, you've really got to own the change and make sure that you do it. Find possibilities, not problems. Pessimism is like deliberate trudging in the mud. Same team, same rules. You know, again, even on a team full of very different people, at the end of the day, fair is fair, and everybody wants the Super Bowl ring or the World Series trophy. So if we're going to talk about teams, we need to be clear about what we mean by that. We want to greet people and make it personal. There are a number of hospitals that actually require staff to smile at everybody they encounter when they're 10 feet away, and to say hello when they're 5 feet away. And this sort of just avoids those awkward things like, oh my God, I hope she doesn't see me. She's going to stop and talk. It's going to take 20 minutes. So it doesn't matter. You got to say hello to everybody. And a number of hospitals that have implemented these kinds of policies have actually seen big increases in patient satisfaction, employee retention. It's been very good for business and staff and patient engagement. Again, we want to listen. We want to pay attention. We want to consider, if you can't, the secret to a long, happy marriage is being able to say, yes, dear. If you can't say, yes, dear, you can say, maybe you're right. But certainly you want to consider that another person may have a point in what they're trying to say. We want to try to be willing to explain. We want to measure twice and cut once, as my mother used to say. Take an extra 5 minutes to make sure that the plan is understood, that everybody's on the same page, that people can find their way around the hospital. This, nonverbal behaviors speak louder than words. Smiles, uniforms, name tags, wayfinding, taking, sometimes it gets a little bit excessive when, the guy in Home Depot wants to walk me all the way across the store to show me where the screwdrivers are. But, people generally like to be helped out. And, certainly in the libraries, people like to be helped to find what it is that they're looking for. We want to express thanks sincerely, and be able to say you're welcome. When somebody says thank you to you, they're giving you a little gift. And when you say you're welcome, you're sort of accepting the gift, and you're both having a little moment. When somebody says thank you and you say, oh, it's no big deal, you're sort of dismissing and diminishing that little gesture. I like to pay attention actually on TV news and on the radio when they'll be interviewing somebody and the reporter will say thank you, and the interviewee will say, oh no, thank you. Very rarely somebody says, oh, you're welcome. And I actually think that that's kind of magical and sort of interesting, that, in fact, the interviewee has done the reporter a bit of a favor. And so anyway, thank you and you're welcome is important. And we added another one too, about being able to speak up and speak out. We really want to encourage our staff, whether it's in the operating room and a surgeon is about to start an operation on the wrong leg, or in the offices or whatever. We really want to support people to be able to speak up and to speak out and to be part of the solution. And Mary Dixon Woods, a nurse leader from the UK, said we need to speak, listen, and act. We speak out locally in the moment and speak up in the hierarchy. What's that line? We need to try to speak up even if our voice shakes. Where's your section of books that tell you simple things you already know? Again, it may be simple, but it's not easy. Dealing with incivility and rudeness is a choice. We stay civil not because they are, but because we are. We need to choose civility. George Bush, said civility is not a tactic or a sentiment, it's the determined choice of trust over cynicism, of community over chaos. And as a former punk rock musician myself, Shepard Fairey has reminded us in the past few years that respecting human dignity is really punk rock now. It's not so much in favor, but it's very important, very radical, very kind of punk rock right now. So imagine, right? We imagine civility. We work for civility when we're smart enough to imagine its rewards, said Professor Forney. And with that, we say buonasera. That's again Professor Forney and his wife with my daughters, and Professor Forney with one of his best friends at his nursery back in Treviso. And so I say thank you for this opportunity.
And with that, I'd like to tell everyone have a good evening.
Thanks again very much. It was great to be with you all. Keep in touch. I look forward to hearing about what you all are doing in Riverside.